Hi, everybody. Thank you very much to Nicole and Katie and Masood for moderating this week as we delve yet further into situatedness. Um, situatedness is a hard kind of concept, is trying to find the edges of it and what are the implications. So, it takes a while to do that. And then we're going to go this coming week into distributed cognition, which is also another quite weird idea to get your head around. But I am finding very productive tension in your discussions this week. I think that you're all speaking from such different kinds of educational contexts, and there's subject area differences. We've got a full range of educational levels, and there's also corporate training and other kinds of training contexts. And I think each of those contexts forces us to think about the application of these ideas and what they mean as we encounter them. And it challenges, I think, our more comfortable assumptions from our own kind of little piece of the educational context, So situatedness is both important and challenging, as you've been discussing this week with the Hung and Chen article and counterpointed by Carl Situated Cognition article. And his discussion of trying to, escape from that, sort of philosophically. And I think that Carl is an amazing writer. Actually, he's really good. And actually, I think he was nominated as one of the 100 great minds of the 20th century or something. So, which is quite an accolade, I suppose. He was also my master's thesis supervisor. And I worked with him and Carl and Marlene Scardamelli for many years, and on Cecil first and Knowledge Forum and all these learning environments. But he always has a real clarity to his work. He has another book called Education and he has several, but Education and Mind in the Knowledge Age, which is a really interesting book too, and very compelling. I'll put a link to that actually. He has many books that talk about schooling and technology because that's really the focus of his work. And he's theoretically a learning scientist whose perspectives are based in psychology. So he comes from a more universalist, rationalist, and positivist. He's not relativist. He's not postmodern. So there are sometimes. Writers from those places, you can be much clearer. It's like working with experiments as opposed to qualitative data. In a way, it's less messy. It simplifies things to a certain point. Sometimes, though, you don't get at the heart of stuff. So I think our really important learning is situated, but I don't think we have to kind of give up and think that we can't have transfer. And there was a bit of a discussion, I think it was in here, about, where was that? Lack of transfer. Oh, I can never find things. Oh, yes. How do we do, if we're going to have, how do we handle assessment in this kind of situation? And there was a couple of comments about the kind of assessments we do in this course, which are ones that look at growth as opposed to a fixed set of knowledge and skills. And I think that really you kind of have to do both because I think I mentioned in a couple of places in this view that the assignments, for instance, that I give you, the learning theories one, where you do a before and after, part of, to me, of really learning is being able to really think about what you've learned here and what it means for the rest of your life, for your other kind of places. And by the end of the course, what's changed. So that's why I do that pre-post thing on your theories of learning. Because I want you to think about this from a metacognitive point of view, because your metacognitive awareness of yourself as a learner is a really important element of what it means to be a learner. It's not just your ability to take exams. And then the other half of this is that because you guys are in graduate school, you're also, I think that part of my goal with my graduate students, regardless of what kind of degree they're doing, because you're all doing graduate degrees of some kind, is that you are in part learning to develop an academic voice, your own voice, and so you need spaces to try that out, which are not just private and not just for me, but also on you, but also for your colleagues, but they're still private enough that you're not kind of having to kind of defend yourself all the time. And that's why I have the learning journals, and where I explicitly ask you to link things together. Because between your different locations, this course, your professional life, other courses, because that in the end is what you will remember. It's the work that you really do intensely. And so we would, and again, there was this thing, it's not just real life that means situated. Everything is situated in its context. And I have a note in here about this. So all kind of learning occurs in some kind of context. The ones that happen in real life are sometimes easier to remember because they are very specific, and and if they're very important, then you're not likely to forget them. But in the right kind of learning environment, which is what Tina was talking about here, it would that kind of rich inquiry context be a better chance of learning for transfer? And I would say yes, because because you're, like in this class, we're dealing with a lot of ideas and then having to think about them over a period of time in relation to like different people's questions and understandings of those things. And so we keep coming back to them, and we rethink them, and then we rethink them again, and you'll rethink them as we go through the course, right? Suddenly something in week 10 will make you think about something that we talked about in situated learning, or and that's good, because that's what learning is, and that to me is evidence that you're kind of putting things together. But you need to have, and knowledge building classrooms and inquiry based classrooms are examples in the school system of where that kind of deep, rich, really complex inquiry goes on over a period of time. And the net result of that from a memory point of view is that there are more hooks and potential connections between the ideas that you've been wrestling with that are now quite richly thought about. And I think of it like, there are hooks. So when you come across something that's even faintly relevant to one of those different situations that you talked about that idea within, that will remind you of it. And so I think you've got a better, the probability is better that you will be able to access and use that knowledge in another situation when you've learned it in a very, very rich, more richly sort of inquiry-based environment. So it's not that situated is better or less good. Situated is really what we have. I mean, we have situated knowledge. That's how we learn. We learn everything in a situation. And then out of that, we have to figure out, that's, a lot of people have been talking about math in this context. And yes, we have to kind of abstract some of those ideas and recognize which are the ones that apply to this context. And it's very hard to do, and anybody who teaches math will tell you that it is very hard to do. But that's partly because math itself is a more abstracted idea. And students don't generate mathematical principles out of their own experience. And so it's a much more of a struggle to do that kind of work with people than it is in some kind of other areas. So, and another thing to keep in mind, just as we go along through the course, is that logic and rational thought, and this is really a lot of this, and a lot of Breider's work too, very much is about that, is about logic and rational thought. And that all comes from Aristotelian and Platonic kind of principles of learning things in the mind, But, relational ways of knowing are much more valued in, for example, indigenous cultures. And so we have to be careful about treating a particular culturally embedded way of viewing the world. And we really do in the West have a very, very rationalist view of the universe. And thinking about it as foundational, because it too is situated. Those of us who grew up in the West and live and have been exposed to those kinds of ideas all our life, we feel that's foundational. That is what the world is. It is that kind of way of thinking. But actually, it is our way of thinking. And there are other ways of thinking. And our formal education process values and emphasizes rational and logical thinking processes. Much of our early learning prepares us for that kind of experience. Think about preschool and kindergarten. You learn, you'll socialize. You also learn to take turns. You learn. You're learning letters and numbers and counting and learning to take on those formal systems. So decontextualized abstract thought isn't so much always emerging from our situated experience, but it's also taught to us. So we are quite good at that on the whole, because it's the valued form of intellectual discourse. If you had a different kind of intellectual discourse, I think things would be very, very different. It's hard to separate those things out because they feel to us so intensely kind of sort of, what's the word? Internal. They come from us. They're natural, I guess, and foundational. But I would argue that we too are situated within our own cultural perspectives, and that's part of what it's helpful to become aware of, and then we can look back and forth at the different, what you get from those different perspectives. Each of them give you something. You may not get other things, but they each have strengths. So, and now we're going to move to distributed cognition, which is which Justin and Sarah are going to lead us through this week. The first sort of go at this, because and distributed cognition isn't really a theory. It's a kind of set of ideas, a set of concepts, and what it's doing is taking us away from the knowledge in the head idea, which is the Aristotelian Platonic idea of it's all in the head, and thinking about knowledge as being distributed amongst the practices and the people and the artifacts in our environment. And it's a kind of cool idea, and it's a very important one actually in this age of particularly of such an age of pervasive technology. But it's also kind of a weird idea. So sit with it as we go through this. It's going to take a little time to sort of gel. And so the challenge of distributed cognition is that they take the individual isn't the unit of analysis for when you're understanding learning. Instead, distributed cognition says, no, we have to look at the whole system. So in this case, it would be you, whoever the person listening to me right now, and me, and the rest of the class, all of the information that we've been accessing, our computer terminals, the internet, it's an entire system. And all of those books and all of those articles that we read are also products of the social environment. They're part of the distributed intelligence, the distributed cognition in the world that we are learning from. So so as I say, sit with this idea. You don't have to get it all in a week. It's just I want you to sort of know it and think about it, and we'll talk about it in the week to come. So have a good week, and I'll talk to you more online.